Hello. Hello, Gina. All right, good service, people. Good service, yeah. So next week, Sunday night begins Hanukkah. We will probably hand out some donuts and latkes. That's next Saturday, the Saturday inside of Hanukkah. Keep that in mind. All right, this week's parasha is Parashat Vayishlach. And I want to start off by asking you guys a question. What would you consider the most valuable item in South Africa?
Electricity.
Electricity, maybe? Yeah. Is it rare as diamonds? It's Hanukkah, we're going to be there in the darkness anyway, remind us of that. Maybe gold, maybe. I would like to suggest the most valuable item in South Africa is something you can find in the grocery store. You can pick it up off the shelf, walk outside the grocery store, and within about 10 minutes, that thing can increase in value by 1,000%. I'm talking about a 2-liter. A 2-liter Coke. Because you walk out of the shop with that 2-liter Coke, and you climb on the highway, and next thing you hear, whoop, whoop, they pull you over. And you have the choice all of a sudden between a 2,000 Rand fine or a 2-liter Coke. The value of that 2-liter Coke shoots up like this in a moment. Because in South Africa, we have what we call a culture of bribery. Now, I want to talk about bribery today. When was the last time you paid a bribe? Don't all shout out at once. You might just incriminate yourself. Yeah, anonymous email, by the way. Anonymous tip. Think about this. How often have you ever been tempted to pay a bribe? How many of you ever have paid a bribe? Think for yourself. And when was the last time you were tempted to actually pay a bribe? Because let's be honest, we get tempted extremely often. Much more than you think. All the time, we get tempted to pay a bribe. And you might not think so because you might be thinking of the big bribes that we are accustomed to hearing on the news. But even in the small details of life, we are always being so close to committing a bribe. For example, with Rebecca's visa that I've been waiting for now for 8 months instead of 8 weeks, right. If I find the guy who can make it come out faster, I'll tell him, take my money. I'm done with waiting for her visa. I need to go. We want to go now in December. We want to have a white Christmas. We want to go in the snow and show Judah the snow. So that's quite a large scale. I don't know if I already do that. That in itself is illegal. But on a daily basis, I caught myself actually bribing. I bribe Judah almost on a daily basis. Okay. I have to. Otherwise, he doesn't take his medicine. So in my sweets cupboard, I've got a stock of these little chocolate bears that I keep on him. And every time he doesn't want to take his medicine, I have to bribe him and tell him, if you take it, I'll give you a chocolate bear. And make a little promise, and he takes the medicine, and I give him a chocolate bear. So I am bribing him on a daily basis. Does that make me a bad person? Yes. Thank you. It's fine, I'll go comfort myself later with chocolates. How do you define what type of bribe is good and what type of bribe is bad? Is there such a thing as a good bribe? Yo, go for it. It's a good thing you're standing. You might want to sit. Now, you might remember last year when we spoke about Esau and Jacob, when we had, I think it was called the outside votes. I gave those 2 votes. No, it was inside last year when we spoke about them. I spoke about the fact that Esau came out red. What does it mean that he came out red? Many of our commentators say that was like an omen for who he would become, his personality. He had a personality that was looking for blood. He wanted to spill blood. And therefore, we know that Esau himself was a murderous individual. And when we look at Esau and Jacob, we compare them to each other. Jacob represents the good inclination, the Yetzer Tov, whereas Esau, he represents the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara. But just because you're born with a certain trait, does that mean you have to become like that one day? No, we spoke about this last year. Someone else in the Bible is also described as red. Of course, I remember Brian said it was. It was David. David is also described as red in the Bible. And David, we know that he did shed a lot of blood in his lifetime, but did he do it with murderous intentions? No, he did it fighting wars for the independence of Israel, for being the king of God's sovereign land. So what David did was he channeled that evil inclination, or that evil inclination, those desires, those feelings of, maybe I want to bribe someone today. He channeled it in the right direction, and that is how we are supposed to live our lives. Okay? So here's a question again. Can our desire to bribe be used for the good? And the reason why I ask this is because Proverbs 21 verse 14 is a very, very interesting verse. Listen to this. This is a verse that we should actually be quoting way more in South Africa to get away with murder, but we don't. It says, a gift given in secret averts anger. A bribe given in concealment averts wrath. You know, it says that in the Bible. And the very next verse talks about righteousness, by the way. It says this in the very Bible. Now, these last few weeks, we've been following the life story of Yaakov Avinu, Jacob. And as we've been reading his life story, let's be honest, we've had some ethical conundrums when we look at his life and the things that he does. Right? Where should we base our ethics upon? They are right up here above me, the 10 Commandments. Jacob is breaking the 10 Commandments left, right, and center. Thou shalt not steal. What does Jacob do with the birthright? He steals it from his brother Esau for the price of a bowl of soup. Thou shalt honor your mother and your father. What does he do when his father is old and blind? He takes advantage of his disability and sneaks in there dressed up as his brother Esau. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Isaac asks him, who is this? And he says, it's Esau. He tries to put on his deepest voice that he can, but he can't. He lies face to face to his father. He bears false witness. This is Jacob. Now, we read in last week's parasha that the tables were turned on him a little bit because Laban went and tricked him with his own trick when Laban gave him the two sisters to get married to, right? So he got a bit of his own medicine in last week's parasha. But right after that, what does he do? Once again, not honoring your father and your mother when it comes to the in-laws. He tricks his father-in-law Laban by saying, all this flock, I'll take these ones that are striped and speckled and you can have the rest. And what does he do? He makes sure that only striped and speckled ones comes out. That's corruption. That's what that is. That's taking the tender, right? He was one of those tenderpreneurs. He is doing all these horrible things. This is one of our patriarchs. What does his name mean, Jacob? There's a few different meanings or explanations. Heel grabber, supplanter, trickster. Jacob the trickster. His life seems to be defined by tricking other people out of things. Yet he is one of our patriarchs. In the battle of good versus evil, Jacob is supposed to be representing good, and Esau is supposed to be representing evil. So too Laban is supposed to be representing the evil. How does he win his battles against evil? Through trickery, bribery, games, all of these, let's say, unethical ways of doing things. Do you think that Jacob ever paid a bribe? Our father Jacob. More than likely. In fact, here in South Africa, the name Jacob is unanimous and synonymous with bribes and corruption, right? Before we ever had Zoom. Yes. So definitely Jacob did pay bribes. Because in this week's parasha, it starts off by him encountering his brother Esau. And he gets so scared that what does he do? He resorts to a bribe at the beginning of this week's parasha. He remembers that the last time he saw Esau promised to kill him. So he thought to himself, okay, once before I bribed my brother with a bowl of soup for the birthright, I might as well try it again this time to bribe him to forget about the death right. And so he sets up a bribe. How much does he bribe? 550 animals. That's a lot of 2-liter Cokes that he bribes his brother Esau with. And it works at the end of the day, right? Because he knows this is what Esau is like. He's very blinded by his own desires. Now, why does the Torah tell us these stories? Tell us of all these wrongdoings of someone as amazing as our patriarch, Yaakov Avinu. Shouldn't the Torah be skipping over the things and only telling us the good stuff that he did in his life? What is the lesson that we can derive from the bribery we read about in this week's parasha? Is there such a thing as a kosher bribe? This is a conundrum, that question, eh? Can we find a loophole in kosher bribes? I want to explore this today. So this week I came across a commentary from the Midrash Tanchuma on this week's parasha Vayishlach, where they were talking about what Jacob did in this week's parasha. And they said about Jacob, that Jacob, the reason why he got scared when he heard about Esau was not so much that he was just fearing Esau, but because he knew that Esau coming to him was a punishment for an oath or a vow that he broke with Hashem. When did Jacob make an oath and a promise to Hashem? Last week's parasha, just after he had the dream of the ladder, the angels ascending and descending, he stood up, woke up, anointed that rock, and he made a promise to God, a conditional promise. Listen to this. Tell me how you would feel if someone makes a promise like this to you. He said to God, if you keep me safe, and if you give me bread, and give me clothes as I go on this journey out of Israel, out of everything that you give me, more, I will give to you 10% when I return safely, if I return safely. It's a conditional promise that he makes to God. In fact, Jacob was bribing God. Can you believe it? He was bribing the Almighty. Can God be bribed? No, he says so himself, right? And it's very interesting this week. I decided to go look at the etymology of the term bribe. Where does it come from? Apparently, the term bribe comes from the French, the old French word, and it was used to mention a portion of bread that you would give to your local priest so he would pray on your behalf to God. Literally a bribe to God, which, by the way, is a mitzvah as well, right? We've got that mitzvah in the Torah. What do we call it? When you must give a piece of bread to the priest? Challah. It's the tithe of challah. That's what the word bribe actually means. It's your tithing of your bread, your challah. So what does God do to Jacob? He reminds him this week, or it's actually in last week's parasha, he reminds him that he made this oath when he left the land of Israel. And while he is sleeping there in the house of Laban, it's time for him to return to the promised land and fulfill his oath by giving his tithe back to Hashem as he enters the land of Israel. And what does he do? Eventually he gets out of the grasp of Laban, and before he goes and gives the tithe, which is the first thing he should be doing on his way to Israel, he first takes a sidetrack to talk with his brother Esau. And instead of giving the tithe to God like he promised, what does he do? The 550 animals in this week's parasha, he uses that tithe to bribe his brother Esau. How many of you have ever done that? I know that, this is way off topic. I just thought of it now. My mom and I were discussing this once. This 2 weeks ago, this week maybe. Once upon a time, many years ago, someone paid the significant tithe into the shul. We were like, oh, Baruch Hashem, this is fantastic. And a week later, they asked for it back. And it was like, okay, fine. It's not our money, it's God's money. But how do you pay a tithe to God and then say, no, I want it back? Jacob is doing the same thing here. He's taking his tithe back and using it for something else so that he can save his own bacon, which makes it an unkosher bribe, I guess. Right? So he encounters Esau and he gives it to Esau. And because of that, the Midrash tells us, God sent him the test. And that night, what happens? As he's prepared all these animals to give away his tithe to Esau, God sends him an angel and he wrestles all night with this angel. So that God could give him a final test to see if he would actually do the right thing. And at the end of the day, God blesses him. Thank goodness, he actually won the fight. But the angel hits him where? Right in his pocket. Because he gave his tithe to Esau. Exactly. Right in his pocket. This is what the Midrash says concerning what's happening in this week's parasha. It gives us like a little bit of a story. A man's ledger of his good and bad deeds. You know, there's this ledger that's always open, right? It's always writing down our good deeds versus our bad deeds. The man's ledger of his good and bad deeds are opened on forced to be opened on 3 special occasions. Of course, it's always opened on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but we force this ledger to be open on 3 occasions. Number 1, says the Midrash, when the man travels alone on a dangerous road. The N4. He's putting his own life at risk. It forces God to open a ledger to see his good deeds and his bad deeds, and whether he deserves protection on this dangerous road. Or if a speedkop might find you halfway. You get the coke, né? Okay, occasion number 2. The ledger is open when a man sleeps in a dilapidated house. It could at any moment fall down on him and kill him in his sleep. God is forced to open the ledger to see if you've got enough good deeds versus your bad deeds to make sure that doesn't happen to you. Or occasion number 3, when a man fails to fulfill his vow to Hashem, he forces God to open the ledger. And if you don't have enough merits, what does God do? He sends you a test. So that you have an opportunity in this final test to cook the books of your ledger. To do some accounting lapses. What do we call those again? I don't know. There's a term for that. But it's so you can cook your books somehow and maybe get in the good books of Hashem. How is this possible? Can God be bribed? No, he can't. You can't give God any gift, can you? Yeshua teaches us how to make a kosher bribe to God. Listen to this. There's a parable in the New Testament. I consider it the most difficult parable to actually understand if you don't know the context in the entire New Testament. The parable of the unjust steward. I want to read that to you guys from Luke chapter 16 right now. And you might be wondering, just like I read you guys that quote from Proverbs earlier, you might be wondering, how did this make it into the Bible as well? Because this might just confuse you even more. Listen to this parable. He also said to his disciples, there was a rich man, right? And he had a steward over his house, and people slandered to him. People came and tattletaled on the steward that the steward is corrupt and stealing his money, saying that he was squandering his master's possessions. So he called him in and said, what is this that I've heard about you? Give an accounting of your management, because you will not be able to be my steward any longer. So what did the steward do? The steward said in his heart, what will I do if my master takes the management away from me? I'm not able to work in the field. Right? I've got these soft hands from working in the office. I'm not able to go door to door and beg. I'm too embarrassed to go beg, he says. I know what I'll do so that I may be taken into their houses if I'm removed from my management position at this loan finance business. He called to every one of the people with whom his master had a claim, people who owed his master money. He said to the first one, how much are you indebted to my master? And the guy said, 100 log of oil is what I owe your master. So the steward said to him, quickly, take your receipt and write on it only 50 instead of 100. 50% off. Black Friday deal. To another one, he said, how much do you owe my master? And he said, 100 quarter of wheat. So he said to him, take your bill and write only 80. You've got a 20% discount. How would you feel if your employee does this with your debts that he's supposed to go and gather? Listen to this. This is where it gets weird. Verse 8. The master, when he found out about this, he praised the steward, the manager, for his wrongdoing, since he behaved so cleverly. For the sons of this world are more clever in their generation than the sons of light. Yeshua says, I also say to you, purchase friends for yourself with mammon of wrongdoing, money of wrongdoing, so that when it is finished, they will take you into eternal dwellings. Does that help, or does that just confuse everything even more? That's a difficult one. So it gives you a loop. There you go. We found a loop to cook the books now, eh? What does it mean? What are we supposed to learn from this parable that Yeshua gives? It sounds like it's saying you should be a trickster like Jacob, like your father Jacob. Can it really be saying that? Well, in the story, the steward, this manager, he is a crook without a doubt. Right? He got caught, to use Esau's term, red-handed, cheating out and stealing from his master, from his boss. So he is a crook, and he knows that he's going to be fired because he doesn't even protest to the fact that he's going to be fired. So what does he do? He quickly tries to cook the books in the final moments before he gets officially fired by his boss. He goes to these people that owe his boss money, and what does he do? He bribes them with discounts, 50% here, 20% there. Why does he do that? Why does he bribe them? It was not Black Friday, which, by the way, do you know where the term Black Friday comes from? When your books are in the red, come Black Friday, you sell everything you can just so you can get back in the black again. So your books are no longer in the red. That's why it's called Black Friday, right? So there's another connection with the red and Esau this week as well. But he does this. He bribes these guys in order to buy favor with them. He knows he's going to lose his job. He won't be able to work in the field. He's not going to be able to beg. He's too embarrassed. So he bribes them so that when he gets fired, he can maybe come and find a job with them. There's many terms for this, kissing up, etc., etc. He buys for himself a comfortable future with someone else's money, by the way. Very puzzling. The most puzzling is the boss's reaction. The boss isn't angry with him. The boss actually praises him and commends him for his trickery and bribery. I asked you earlier, how would you feel if your employee does this? Goes and writes off debts that people owe you. You'd be angry. You've already fired him. How else can you punish him now? So what Yeshua does is Yeshua uses this parable to show us how the non-religious, we call the sons of this age, how smart they are about investing in their own future. Very clever. He's shrewd and he's tricky and he's a bad employee, but he's very clever in how he invested in his future. And Yeshua says to us, we too should be cooking the books. How much more so, says Yeshua, should the sons of light, which is us, the believers, those of us that have a share in the Messianic era, God willing, we should use our worldly materials, our mammon of wrongdoing, all the money we make in this world, to invest in what? Our future. Which future do we believe in? The Messianic era, the future era, the Messianic age. That's how we should be. That's what we should learn. Yeshua instructs his disciples saying, purchase friends for yourselves with the mammon, money of wrongdoing, so that when you are finished, they will take you into eternal dwellings. Eternal dwellings, that is, of course, the Messianic age. So what are these friends? What are these friends that we are supposed to purchase with actual money in this life? What can we use in this life with our money to purchase that will actually last into the world to come? Can we take any money into the world to come with us? No, we get buried without pockets, right? So how can we use our money in this life, our mammon of wrongdoing, to purchase for ourselves something in the future? What are these friends? These friends are merits, mitzvot, midot, our character traits. All of these good deeds that we accumulate through using our money in this life. Which mitzvot do we do by using money? Tzedakah, charity, tithing, maaser. These are the ways that we can purchase for ourselves something that will accompany us even beyond the grave. That is what this parable is about. This, according to Yeshua, is in fact a kosher bribe. Once you have done this, not bribe the spitkop, but bribe life in itself so that you can invest in the future, what you've done is you've controlled your Yetzer Hara. You found a way to control that evil inclination that you had within you. We all have it. Sometimes you want to bribe someone. This is how you should do it. Channel it in the right direction. Now, why is it that the boss in the story isn't angry? What's the parable teaching us here? Who is the boss in the parable? It's Hashem, of course. Hashem doesn't get angry at us when we spoil his money, because everything in this world belongs to him in the first place. He owns all the money in the world. In fact, your money isn't even yours. It's God's money. It's God's possession. He created this entire world. We are only stewards and managers of God's money. So the fact that we take God's money, everything He's created in this world, and we use it in order to invest for something in the future, for the Messianic era, we're using this mammon for the kingdom. That is why He is not angry when we spoil His money and His mammon in this world. That's the whole reason why He gave it to us in the first place. So every single one of us has an evil inclination deep down inside you. We all have an inner Esau who is attracted to mammon and the mammon of this world, who loves to pay a bribe when necessary to take the short route out of life. We've all got that inside of us. But we should learn from these stories today as well, that you have the power to overcome your evil inclination. You have the power to channel that urge of bribery and trickery, which sounds bad on face value, and use it for good. Use it for bettering the kingdom of Hashem. The lesson for this week is that we too, like Jacob, who wrestled with his brother Esau, we too wrestle internally between our good inclination and our evil inclination. We get tempted just like everyone else. But what do? We channel our evil inclination, all this trickery that we want to do, based upon the Messianic era. And if we can aim it in the right direction, we will do as Yeshua says. We'll purchase for ourselves friends that will take us into eternal dwellings. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
How's that for turning bribery into a good thing? My application for parliament is on its way.